go on to silent, please? Because there's loads of you. There's 94 of you, so we don't want lots of background chatter. Secondly, a number of people haven't been able to get in, and we are actually pretty well full now. So we are recording this, and we will be putting out a link to the recording later. I believe that MCC licensing are also going to be doing a fact sheet afterwards. And obviously Gareth is always, well, I'm not going to say always available because he gets enough calls in the late evening and early morning, but will be available for future discussions and description and help as we move forward. So we're going to work our way through. First up is going to be Rhiann Greaves from Panonians, who's going to be talking around some of the health and safety implications of opening up. Then we're going to talk to Kate MacDonald from Manchester City Council, the city centre team, about how the public realm will be used. We'll move on to Danielle and Fraser from MCC Licensing in terms of how they're going to support and what is going to be possible for nighttime economy businesses. And then we'll have Zach Fraser from GMP to talk through from his point of view as well. So I'm hoping between all of those people, most of your questions will be answered. We have got an awful lot of questions in. Obviously, if there are follow-ups, do send them in. Do use the chat function, but I'm not convinced we're going to have a huge amount of time today to be answering questions. So particularly if they're detailed questions, do maybe send them in and we'll try and answer them. So for those late joining, please go on to mute. And I'm going to hand over to Rhiann. Rhiann, thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Thanks for asking me to join you this afternoon. I'm an associate partner in the regulatory team at Panoni Corporate, so based in the city centre, and my practice is really to support businesses both proactively in terms of their health and safety compliance, but also reactively in helping deal with any issues with the authority as and when they arise. I've spent an awful lot of time over the past couple of weeks talking to businesses about how to open up in various sectors, and I have to say it's an extraordinary challenge that you are all facing. I think particularly so for you, where you've got a very public face to your business as well as the private and sort of administrative and managerial face of it. And I think one of the big problems that a lot of our clients have found is that coronavirus in so many ways is such a unique challenge, because on top of the fact that you having a business risk now to manage, how are we going to reduce transmission risk as far as possible on our businesses? You are going to be faced with a panel of experts, both from your workforce but also from your customers. We have all watched the news, we all have our own views about how far 2 meters is and whether that's the appropriate distance, and because our lives have been so impacted by it, and the message I think I would like you to take away, certainly from what I've got to say today, is you're going to have to take these people with you. You're going to have to take both your customers and your employees with you as you determine how best to manage this from your business's perspective. Because this is going to be all about building confidence in your employees to get them back to work, because some of them will be feeling reticent about it, but also building confidence from your customers that your venues are venues they're happy to go to, they feel safe, and they feel confident that you're thinking about them as well as yourselves and your business. So it's really a matter of engagement, I would say, because I do think that in the government guidance that is available, and I quite appreciate that your guidance sadly isn't yet available, but what we can see from a consistent picture from what is available for other sectors is that the involvement of employees and unions in the guidance is just palpable. Your employees effectively are being encouraged to whistleblow if you get this wrong, and obviously you will know better than I will the problems that are raised by keyboard warriors on social media when businesses that we visit don't get it right. So I think having some clarity around your messaging in terms of what you want people to do and how you want them to do it is going to be really, really important. Looking at the issue of guidance, I have to say I had hoped by now that you would have your sectoral guidance from the government. I suspect that may well come if there is at some point, hopefully soon, a determination about the issue of the 2 meter rule. But what I would say is there's quite a lot of good guidance out there already that you can certainly use to help you start to plan. Now, there are 8 sets of guidance on the gov.uk website, and the first 11 pages of those guidance are completely identical. So whether you pick up the guidance about restaurants offering takeaway options, or manufacturing, or construction, or whatever it might be, the first 11 pages are identical. So I would say it's a fairly safe bet that when your guidance comes out, you will find the same thing. So you can take a look in there about what you're being asked to do, and when you do, you will see that what employers are being asked to do is probably, I mean, it goes far further than certainly your legal health and safety obligations. You're being asked to really, from a moral standpoint, do whatever you can to make people feel confident in coming to see you and your business. But what that government guidance will be when it eventually turns up for you is effectively a checklist, so that if there are any problems in the future, you will need to be able to demonstrate some compliance with that guidance, and if you can't comply with it, you need a really good reason why not, because that is going to be the starting point for any complainant, any regulator, any court that comes to look at what you've done, and hopefully you never get as far as the court as far as this is concerned, but that's going to be their starting point. So how have you measured up against that particular guidance? If there is then that's supplemented by trade association guidance, and I know I've seen some from UK Hospitality, for example, which is very useful, certainly take account of that. The final thing I would say about guidance when it becomes available is keep an eye on it. So as we all know, non-essential retail opened yesterday. The 4th edition of their guidance came out on Sunday night. So, you know, the timing is not always helpful. It doesn't give you a huge amount of time to adapt, but you are going to have to just appoint one person whose job it is to keep on top of the guidance and where it's up to. Now, I haven't got a huge amount of time today to talk about the practicalities, and I, in fact, did an hour-and-a-half webinar just on this the other day. So if you do have further questions that you haven't been able to put through to CityCo, you know, you'll find my details on our Panoni corporate website, so please just get in touch. I'm happy to talk through any detailed issues that you might have. But just in terms of some basics, your starting point is going to have to be risk assessment. You will need a COVID risk assessment for your business. That's a matter of basic health and safety law, but you will need that COVID assessment. There are lots of templates online that you can gather. Indeed, you can use your own. If you've got your own risk assessment template, use that. That will be fine. But that's all about looking at what the hazard is in the context of your specific business. So that's the important thing. It's got to be specific to your business, but also specific to your sites. So if you've got multiple sites across the city, and indeed elsewhere beyond Manchester, and they're all slightly different, maybe in different kinds of buildings, maybe offering a slightly different service, you're going to have to look at it on a site-by-site basis to make sure that whatever measures you put in place are appropriate. When you're looking at the risk assessment, this is basically your thorough walkthrough of your operations to help you decide what control measures you're going to have to put in place, because without doing that, you're basically just going to be guessing. One of the things the government guidance is asking employers to do is to share that risk assessment. Now, you should be doing that anyway. The reality is, for the most part, employees aren't really bothered what risk assessments say about typical risks. You might find it's different in this case. And one of the things the government is saying is you should be sharing those results with your workforce, but also where you have more than 50 employees, which will apply to some of you, the government is expecting you to post those results on your website. So if you take a look, for example, the big retailers now will have a COVID section of their website where they're going to tell you, you know, if you're going to come and visit our shop, this is what we are expecting from you, this is what we're doing for you. Likewise applies in your sector. So where there's more than 50 employees, there is an expectation that will appear on your website. So you're sharing the information, and you know that as I say, this is all about building confidence, telling people what you're doing. The government messaging, I have to say, is not that helpful around this idea of COVID security. Being COVID secure, they're wanting you to display a blue tick to say I've been through the COVID risk assessment process. Certainly do that when you have, because that is building the consumer confidence that you want to achieve. But at the same time, the government guidance recognises you're not going to be able to eliminate the risk of coronavirus from your property, from your premises, from your operations. And so this messaging around COVID secure is a little bit inconsistent with that. But certainly, you know, displaying that blue tick tells customers, staff, that you've done what you need to do. Now, one of the things I would say about your risk assessment is just be careful that when you are carrying out risk assessment, identifying control measures, you don't somehow open up a risk elsewhere in your business. So, for example, my daughter's gone back to school this week. One of the things they're doing is keeping windows open in the classrooms because ventilation is great for reducing the risk. That's okay. But for example, propping your fire doors open to achieve that isn't going to be okay. So make sure you're not creating risks by managing your COVID risk. Looking at some of the practicalities, and I know we'll cover this when we get to some of the questions that you've raised. Obviously, the 2 metre rule is under review. We would like, obviously, some clarity on when we might hear more on that. If I were a betting woman, which I'm not, but if I were, I would say it's probably, I think it's likely it will be reduced, but I couldn't guarantee that. I think you've got to start to plan on the basis of 2 metres, but I think obviously you won't want to be making too many significant investments. If it's going to be costly, you won't be making too many significant investments until we've got some clarity on that. And there has obviously been a lot of concentration, certainly in the press, about what 2 metres means for you as businesses from a customer perspective. Remember, you've also got to think about 2 metres from an employee perspective. So what happens backstage? Where do they congregate? How do they move around the premises? Those sorts of issues are also going to have to be considered. Frequency of cleaning is going to be obviously very, very important in terms of upping that and making sure that frequently touched surfaces have been identified, they've been added to cleaning rotas, where you can remove possible transmission sources. So, for example, do you need menus on tables? Where you can remove things like that, and maybe consider a different way of displaying that information if you can. One thing to think about that could easily be overlooked is where you have contract cleaners coming into your business, so third party carrying out your cleaning. You need to ask the question of them, what are they doing about their COVID risk assessment? Because there's no point you spending hours on yours if they're going to come in and undo all your good work, if you're not happy about the way that they're going to go about it. And I think the other big thing in terms of customer areas to think about will be flow, how people move around your premises, whether you want them to be able to move around as much as they typically do, perhaps not. Think about where people typically congregate and how you might go about dispersing that somewhat, whether that's by table service or whatever it might be. In terms of your employees, one of the management controls that a lot of businesses are looking at now is putting their employees into bubbles. So you're reducing the number of personal contacts that people have. So if possible, people are rotated to be on shift with the same team ish every time, so that you're reducing the number of people they're coming into contact with, and staggering start times and that sort of stuff to help out with that. And your employees just need reminding to display the Public Health England information about symptoms, about hand washing, and if they come to work symptomatic, please think before you open about what you will do. If symptomatic people arrive on your premises, how are you going to deal with that? How are you going to isolate them until they can safely go home? Your own sort of mini version, if you like, of track and trace in terms of other employees that they may have had some significant contact with over the course of their time. I appreciate that's a really quick canter through it. We're going to go into some more of the practicalities when we get to the questions. But as I say, successful management of this is going to be all about confidence, both with your employees and with your customers. Keeping them involved in the process, making them feel like they're important to you, which of course they are, and providing the flexibility so that if they tell you that something isn't working, you know, you're going to have a huge number of new rules to put in place. Some of them will be great and will fly from day one. Others will be more of a challenge. But where they've got new rules, you know, the flexibility to adapt your approach to suit.
Thank you very much, Rianne. That was very comprehensive. So if you got an hour and a half version of that, probably not as comprehensive as that. One question through from Donna. What is the blue tick that you were talking about?
Okay, so you will see when you look on the existing gov.uk website where the existing guidance is and where your guidance will eventually go. There is, it's a bit like the scores on the doors that we have from food safety perspective. There is a blue tick, which the government, a logo that the government have basically are encouraging businesses to, particularly whether it's public face, they're encouraging businesses to physically display that in the premises to show a demonstration that, yes, we carried out our COVID risk assessment and we are implementing the measures that we've identified.
That's great. Thank you for that. And now, from the City Council, Kate. Assuming you can hear okay?
Yes, thank you very much.
Good, thank you very much indeed.
Okay, so I'm the City Centre Strategic Lead for the Council, and I'm going to take this opportunity to just give some of the headline information to bars and clubs about the work the council's doing to support you and the principles that we're using, and then my colleagues will talk more specifically from a licensing point of view. So first off, I want to say that we're very aware of the frustration and indeed anger that people in the sector are feeling with the lack of guidance and the as yet no clear date. And we share that and empathise with you about how difficult that makes some of the practicalities. There are, of the questions that have come in from you all, there are many that actually aren't within our power. So what we're trying to do is look at where we can support and ease the path into reopening in these lockdown and COVID times. Even though we haven't got some of the powers that we would like. And the principles that the council is working to on this is that we've got very strong support from the leadership and from politicians about the importance of our pubs and clubs and the hospitality sector and what a key part of the vibrancy of our city it is, and how much we want to make sure we support people to come back. And we want to be as creative as we possibly can be, wherever we've got leeway and flexibility, we want to use that. But there are some things we haven't got, currently got leeway on, and we're lobbying government to give us more flexibility rather than have a load of red tape to get through. And it's particularly, of course, around the use of outdoor space, but other things that can make the reopening more successful. I need to say that for the council at the moment, the main priority is actually that we're still in a public health crisis. But that hopefully is going to be something that gradually reduces, and that links into what was just being said, that we have to be thinking all the time that we're in a changing situation. And the 2 metre guidance, for instance, is a clear example of that, in that, yes, we've got 2 metres at the moment, but it's a fairly random figure, and chances are that's going to change in due course. The council's communication at the moment to the public and to customers coming back into the city centre since yesterday is very much welcome back, and you may have seen our welcome back campaign on social media and lots of assets that can be shared. So we'll put a link onto this, I'm sure, for that. But our messaging at the moment is trying to achieve a balance about the public health crisis, but we want to go much bigger and bolder as soon as we can into the summer about encouraging people back into the city centre. So we will do what we can to be creative, and it's very important that we all work together and do our bit on reassuring customers and the public about all the measures that are in place to keep them safe, but also their responsibility as individuals to follow the guidelines. and that we've got as a council a need for balance. So obviously we've got daytime venues, we've got nighttime venues, we've got pedestrians needing more space, we've still got drivers who want to get around the city, we've got people who live in the city. We've got to take into account all sorts of different needs and find a way through that. But we are determined to do that. I've got one more point really that's specific to work that I'm doing currently, and that's about the use of public realm in the city centre. So there are lots of businesses who might have a small amount of outdoor space that they can use, but others who've got none. So I'm looking with colleagues, and there's political support for this in principle, about using spaces within the city centre to provide tables and chairs, and for them to be cleaned and that sort of thing, so welcoming, safe environment. And mapping into introducing that in several areas of the city centre that wouldn't be attached to any particular venue, but that customers, members of the public, can collect a takeout meal or whatever, and feel that there's somewhere safe they can sit while we've got such a reduction on indoor space. I think that's probably all I can want to say at the moment. So thank you.
Thank you, Kate. And continuing with MCC, to pass over to Danielle Doyle from MCC Licensing. That shocked you, Danielle, sorry.
Hi everyone, for those who haven't met me, as Vaughan said, it's Danielle Doyle from the licensing unit. I hopefully did see many of you on the last call. I think we had about three weeks ago or so. So I just wanted to update you on what we have been doing since, because I'm very conscious, not least of seeing the questions that have come through again, which, you know, exemplify how frustrating it is for you guys. You're desperately seeking answers to these questions, and as Kate said, we are to a lot of them ourselves from central government, and we haven't clearly been able to make any announcements to you at a local level since the last meeting. So I just wanted to tell you what we have been doing. I mean, we have been lobbying government hard. We need relaxation around the current regulations to unlock this for us, to enable us to license tables and chairs in any kind of real way around the city, that will assist you guys. We are still awaiting feedback from government to some proposals that we sent them last week. It appears that they may be looking at setting up a national process for temporary licenses of tables and chairs or outside seating, called different things around the country. There's some noises coming through that they are open to reducing the need on public consultation and no requirement for planning consent, which for us are two of the major sticking points to this. So hopefully, we are hopeful, but as yet, you know, a caveat there, we've got nothing concrete back. We don't know what announcements are going to be made, or when, or indeed if these things will be forthcoming as we've asked for. I think the other major sticking point for us is, as it stands, the legal advice we're getting. So we haven't found a way, a route to suspend parking bays for the purpose of putting tables and chairs on the highway. We're still looking and questioning all the ways we may be able to get around that. So we've been having, as officers, several conversations with legal, with colleagues in highways, neighbourhood services. Obviously, any potential closure of roads to facilitate outdoor seating would require consideration of access for deliveries and waste collection and all that kind of thing. Obviously, colleagues from GMP and senior managers and councillors, as well as colleagues from GM, there's obviously a need to learn and understand how other people might be reacting, but to try and gain some consistency. We've talked to other core city local authorities who have, you know, more of the kind of challenges that we have in Manchester City Centre, the Local Government Association, the Ministry for Communities and Local Government, and the Department for Transport, to try and work through all these considerations, the restrictions we've currently got, the risks that have to be thought through, to enable us to establish what our local approach will be, taking in all those conflicting demands that, you know, that Kate alluded to, with the resident community in the city, the need for pedestrian space, and obviously the strong desire to support your sector. That has been very clear from members. So we've been working on our own licensing policy, specifically for the tables and chairs, because that's obviously the key thing to unlock here. We have designed a streamlined process and application form. That's with ICT, and we hope to make that live on the website this week, and we'll notify you know, CityCo and the chair of the networks and the groups to make sure that you're aware when that goes live. But we have also helpfully received a number of proposals through via Gareth, which is really helpful. We have started the job on the ground of actually going out and looking at those and assessing what's feasible. We're trying to get ahead on this as far as we can, but obviously nothing can be determined. We can't make any decisions until we get announcements from central government. But we're trying to get as ahead locally as we can in terms of the parameters of what will be involved when we can start granting and issuing these licenses. So there's key decisions for us around the duration of any temporary licenses, what the terminal hours may be, the level of space that may be required, pedestrian space that may be required around a licensed area, what furniture and glassware will be allowed, whether live music, obviously. It was a question from last time. It's obviously unregulated, but will there be any kind of restrictions around that, and streamlining the conditions? All those, in terms of their risk and considerations, have been thought through, and are awaiting decisions from members when government make any announcement on what a national process may or may not be, because we don't know if they're going to nationally introduce things like terminal hours and things like that. So we need to wait that, and when then all our decisions will follow. I think I'd also say at the minute, unless you hear otherwise from us, you'll be able to use your current tables and chairs license if you're lucky enough to have one. I hasten to add that you know, we're still working through with Highways Department locations of the city where they need to make ongoing amendments to the highways for pedestrian safety. And as we work through those, you'll be contacted if necessary, if there are any impacts on your licensed area. But we are also trying to avoid that wherever possible. And I just reiterate what Rhiannon said about the anticipated government guidance. Again, you know, we're looking to provide you further advice as necessary once we've seen the guidance, and we see what gaps there is or not. And I think it'll be useful to have further dialogue with you as soon as any such guidance is published. And I think with before we go into the questions, I think that's all I wanted to say as an initial presentation, if that's okay.
Thank you very much, Danielle. Fraser, have you got things to add to that?
Yeah, just a few points. Obviously, you've had the questions through, so thanks for those. So I suppose one of the key ones which was asked was about controlling the amount of people who are going to be wanting to attend, and asking us how to do that. And I suppose it's a question we've got for you as venues, and I think moving forward we'd like probably a bit more engagement with respect to how we do that. I mean, obviously there's ideas around there about, you know, pre-booking, use of apps. So, you know, I suppose I put the message out there that in sort of planning for reopening, you know, it's worth considering. I mean, obviously we don't know what the impact of social distancing requirements will be, but you'll be able to start modelling what your capacity will be, determined by those social distancing requirements. So I suppose what I would say is why not sort of prepare different plans for different measurements, just so you're ready to react quickly. Obviously, you'll need to monitor and limit entry to your premises to prevent social distancing requirements being undermined. So, you know, start thinking how you'll do that. It's no good having all these plans in place if people are just coming through the door unchecked. The other thing as well is there's obviously going to be far much more demand for outside space. And so the space that was there for queuing, for smoking, you know, it's not going to exist. And equally, you know, any queuing will have to be socially distanced. So any capacity for that will be far reduced. So, you know, start thinking about, you know, queuing procedures, what you might put in place, and also maybe prohibiting queues where there isn't the facility for appropriate social distancing. Obviously, we've talked about the guidance, and yeah, it's really frustrating, and we're waiting for it. There has been obviously guidance released in other countries, Ireland, for example. So it's worth having a look at that to get some ideas. Obviously, it won't be the guidance that you're required to have regard to, but it will give you some ideas as to, you know, what you might want to start considering. Obviously, we've touched upon the external seating. So essentially, yes, it's going to be a fast track procedure. Hopefully, that's what we're you know, looking for government to give the green light for. The revised process that we've got essentially slims down our existing one, and it will require two things from you. So one will be a plan of the proposed layout, so similar to what you would do now for a tables and chairs license. It's showing the boundary of the area in context with the actual premises and the highway, and so any other street furniture that might be in place. So you'd have to mark things like lampposts and that. So obviously it should be to scale and include the relevant measurements. So if you are sort of contemplating having some new outdoor space, you know, you've got some ideas, start putting down those on paper, and obviously measuring it out. The other thing will be asking for photos of your furniture. So that should be simple enough. So you know, start getting those things together. You know, what we envisage is any licenses that are granted, you'd be required to have public liability insurance, but that you just need to get that for when you operate, rather than a prerequisite to apply. So I was asked, obviously we were asked about social distancing, and obviously, you know, it's all going to come out through the guidance. So obviously currently it's 2 meters. We know that in Europe, in some places it's 1. I think Germany is 1.5. So again, you know, I think, you know, consider how your premises might change subject to those different requirements. So, you know, reassess the layout of your premises. You know, think about, you know, the layout plan. Obviously, attached to your premises license, you have a plan attached to that. Most reorganisation of that layout will, I'd imagine, would just be furniture. In which case, you know, you don't need that change reflecting on the plan. The only caveat with that is if anything's going to affect things like fire exits, then that's when, you know, we'll probably start asking for such changes to be approved. So again, start considering things like preparing for table seating and service only, the use of apps, promoting contactless payments, how your furniture, your tables, your seating will be arranged to ensure appropriate distancing. And ultimately it'll be a matter, I think as Rhiannon said, you know, it's there for you to risk assess, subject to your own business, as to what will meet the COVID secure guidelines. You know, you're going to have to likely display signage, whether that be throughout the premises or at entrance. So again, start thinking as to how you might look at that. And, you know, you've probably done it already, but things like modelling the customer journey. So from entry, you know, things like using the toilets, placing orders, leaving, and also similarly for your staff, just so you can get a good idea of the risks associated. So we were asked what support will be available for reopening, and I suppose ultimately we'll know more as to what will be required when we get the guidance. You know, we are looking, you know, as to identify some points that we'd like to see consistency across operators, and so I suppose in sort of thinking about what support, you know, we can give you, I suppose it would be to ask, you know, what areas would you as operators wish to get support in, you know, which areas would you wish to see consistency, you know, is it across entry policies, use of PPE policies, reporting procedures, and, you know, I suppose things like entry procedures, for example. You know, Rhiannon mentioned the potential of screening customers for entry, and different premises will have potentially different capabilities to do that. I mean, I've seen examples of temperature checking, things like that. So what I would like is I would like to see and challenge operators to see how you can work together to ensure that there is consistency around those kind of approaches. There's no point one premises taking all sorts of measures to you know, prevent people who may be at risk from entering the premises, for them to be refused only to go somewhere else and gain entry. It just undermines everything, and I think it's something that the trade and operators can really work together on, particularly in areas where there are sort of you know, a number of premises neighbouring each other. I was asked about use of disposable plastics to reduce transmission of COVID. Obviously, that will be a matter for risk assessment. I'm not sure it's something we would expect or require disposable plastics. I mean, obviously, Council is committed to reducing single-use plastic, and from I've seen from other guidance that you know, glass and polycarbonate subject to you know, being cleaned in commercial grade dishwashing units, you know, would be fine. So I can't see why that would be any different. We'd ask how we deal with disruption. Zach's going to speak after that. So you know, he can give a steer on that. But ultimately, you know, I think it's important that you as operators consider the, you know, how you operate, the service style, and you know, the operation and you know, the service around alcohol, because that's going to have a direct impact on potential risks of no compliance. The other thing to take into account is how you're going to brief security to ensure that they're aware of you know, your company policies, your entry procedures. And like I mentioned before about consistency between different venues, obviously you'll get, you know, the same door companies working across different premises. So it will be better for all involved if we can look to ensure some degree of consistency. what's the approach going to be in relation to enforcement? So obviously, most door supervisors conditions, they'll either be on a risk assessment basis where it's for you to determine, or it will specify a certain number. So if you do have specific numbers required, I've not heard that there's going to be any specific deregulation around any conditions in the meantime. So if you do require any further information of that, by all means, drop us an email as to how we might deal with that. Also, you know, you've got the time now, review your licenses and look at any conditions that you think you might not be able to comply with due to the state of things with regards to reopening. And, you know, if you've got any questions with that, by all means, drop us an email. Annual fees, we've not been sending out invoices or requests for payment since lockdown, and our approach will be that we're not going to be expecting payment until later in the year. And so, so ordinarily, you know, you'll be aware that if you don't pay your annual fee, we have to suspend your license. So obviously we're putting that on hold to allow everybody to hopefully get back on the feet to some degree. How will social distancing be policed? You know, ultimately that's a matter for yourselves to manage, but again, I'm sure Zach will touch upon that. So I suppose I'd just finish off really by asking, you know, there are things that we'd want to know, and I spoke to Gareth earlier about how we can maybe capture some information ahead of the lifting of lockdown. And so, you know, it's important for us to be able to support you in understanding, you know, how venues are going to manage capacity, how you're going to manage entry, and try and avoid sort of unnecessary demand. So when will you be reopening? You know, will it be same days, hours as previous? You know, what will your projected capacity limits look like? And also, are you planning on operating any differently to how you did previously? And so we can understand that. I think Gareth's going to be doing some work to try and hopefully capture some of this information from you. But again, if you could start thinking about maybe getting some of that together. So yeah, I think that's it from me. Thanks, Vaughan.
Thank you, Fraser. Yeah, just to reiterate that, Gareth is underway with just trying to gather from you as much as possible when you're looking at opening, assuming that we do have a July the 4th opening date, and what hours you're looking at opening, just so we can understand what is actually going to happen in the city centre and pass that back to GMP and also transport providers as well. That's really important. Over to you, Zach. A number of questions were for you as well.
Yeah, I think you pretty much just stole the main point for myself, to be honest with you, Vaughan. I really need to know who's going to be opening on the 4th of July. And you can do it in a couple of ways, even if it's actually if it's still at 2 metres, we won't be opening. But if it reduces to less than that, then yes, we will. Please pass that through to Gareth, because I'm trying to come up with a policing plan and the operation around what this looks like from go live. And the last thing I want to be doing is sort of putting blockages in the way through the licensing powers, because I can't police it effectively. So I'm really relying on yourselves now to give me the information I require, because if I don't get it, all I'll do is I'll just start slowing down the licensing process to give me the time to put the resources in place, which is the last thing I'm going to do in supporting the businesses. But my number one priority is still the public health and public safety, and I can't get away from that in my sort of duties and responsibilities. And if that means that places don't get to open because I can't put the required safety requirements around that, then that's just a real harsh message that I'll have to deliver. And also a really negative way of starting, but I just really need to hit that hole really hard, because I've been asking this for months now, basically, in terms of, right, who's planning on opening? I'm still not getting anywhere with it. So Other than that, I think there's a few questions that, to be honest with you, I can't answer is the honest answer. We started really well with actually, you look at the government guidance and how late on it's been delivered, and we're in exactly the same position where. Oh, it's just reading comments at the same time. Exactly the same position where we are working on guidance as soon as it comes out, the same as you are. In terms of words, things like phrases like how is it going to be policed, how's COVID going to be policed, I've got no intention on policing venues, as I wouldn't do any other sort of given day. Yes, we can come in to support if needed, but my ultimate aim is to make this as much as business as usual as possible. I don't want to change the way we operate between GMP licensed premises and the security industry. What I'm really keen to do is just make sure we shift our operating model to suit. What I will say is, though, if we do get premises that are deliberately not putting things in place, I think there's a question around who's responsible. Is it the sort of customer or the organisation? Then we will look towards licensing powers to do what needs to be done to protect public safety. Took some legal advice around the spread of COVID-19 and all arrows are pointing, although it's not been tested in court, that the spread of COVID-19 could be classified as a public nuisance, which would then open some significant powers in the Licensing Act that if we need to review and close people down, then we will do that. So all I can ask from businesses, and this goes right back to what I said 3 months ago, it's all down to that personal responsibility. If you put the plans in place and you do everything that we sort of put out in terms of risk assessment and everything else like that, I'm not going to hold it against you if you get 1 or 2 idiots coming on a Friday night and cause issues. How can I do? It's the general public we're dealing with. But what I won't accept is a premises that doesn't really care, is openly advertising, sort of free for all, no COVID restrictions here, that type of thing. They're the premises that we're coming down really hard on. In terms of policing plan and operation, at the moment it's very fluid. We're talking, it depends very much on what opening looks like and whether the government restrictions get reduced and how many of yourselves come back to us. I could be looking at anything from a full-blown New Year's Eve operation with 160 cops on that first Saturday if it's the 4th of July, right down to actually we think it's going to be reduced opening hours and we're going to be finishing at 12, so I'll spread my resources across the afternoon. It's up in the air, is probably the best way of putting it. But the more information you can give me around your plans and the better intelligence you can feed through to me around what your intentions are, the more accurately I can put my resources in place to support you and your teams. Apologies, that's my dog doing me head in. I hate working from home. Vaughan, I think that's pretty much it for me, to be honest with you, as a very quick summary of where we're at. A lot of it at the moment for GMP is in the unknown sector, as it is for the businesses themselves. And we're very reliant on what the business plans are to look at then, what security we need to put in place around that, particularly around queuing and things like that. So if you're not going to operate a ticket system and you are planning on having queues, then one of our main concerns would be sort of counter-terrorism security advisor concept, where we go around and we actually review that we're aware of those queues, are then more vulnerable to a marauding vehicle attack or terrorist attack. Because I take all that into account when we're planning on opening and give that the green light.
Yeah, that's a task that we actually did yesterday with retail, wasn't it? Went round with the CTU officers, looking at how those queues were working, whether they were creating potential issues around marauding vehicle attacks. So that's more information that you have on board. The easier that will be to do ahead of time. Thank you very much for that, Zach. So we've had a few questions through, which I think we've answered on the way along. So we're going to be looking by the end of the week, hopefully, from what Fraser and Danielle were saying, that we'll be able to get a form out that is actually be able to run through the information required to look at the outside areas. In the meantime, Gareth, whose email address I've put up, which he will probably be swearing at me for because he gets enough emails already, if you want to send him details of opening times and when you're planning to open. But he has also worked extensively with a number of businesses and a number of groups of businesses on how to put plans together for the public realm. So if you are looking at your outside areas, what you need to do in terms of those to get that information into licensing and to look at the potential for using it outside, whether you currently have a tables and chairs license or whether you are using a back street or some other street that could potentially be converted. There are processes for doing that, and by the end of the week, we'll have a much better idea of what that process is. But as everybody stressed, we'd hope to come today having heard all of the government guidance come down on Monday, But as everybody stressed today, you know, we are still waiting for that official government guidance, and it's as frustrating for the City Council and for officialdom as it is for all of the businesses. It does mean that please keep in touch with us. As I said, I put up Gareth's email, but if you're not on our database and you got this through one of the many networks in town, or through a colleague, or through a peer business, please email your address through to events@cityco.com, and we'll make sure that the link to the transcript of this and all the background information will go out to that list as soon as we have it. We have been recording this, so it will go up probably later today or first thing tomorrow on our YouTube channel, if there is any information that you didn't catch, and then we will put up the form and links to the form and links to the process, particularly around public realm, as soon as we have those later in the week or very early next week. I think it's very likely that we'll probably do another one of these before the 4th of July or soon after the 4th of July. I'm hoping opening for you guys goes as smoothly as opening for retail did yesterday, though presumably you won't have sneaker offers that you launch on the first day of coming back to drive people in, which was entertaining in the least. Thank you all for attending. It's been our most populous Q&A yet, so much appreciated. Thank you to all the speakers for their invaluable advice, and please keep in contact with us, and we'll keep talking to you. Thank you.